Hello there and welcome to the video. Well, we have the first, not the first sensation, but this is one of the sensations of the tournament. Fabiano Caruana, the world number 2, against the world number 124, Rinat Jumabayev. We should mention, of course, that Sindarov from Uzbekistan, he already knocked out Ali Reza. That was one of the biggest sensations so far. But Rinat Jumabayev rated 26-37, solid grandmaster, but he's facing the former World Championship candidate. And let's see what happened. They drew the first game, and not really much to say about the opening phase of the game. They basically played the Queen's Gambit declined. After starting with c4, the English opening, we transpose here. Fabi takes on d5, bishop g5. Everything is standard here. Queen c2 to block this move, and everything is standard. Bishop d3, and from here white keeps the option of playing knight f3 or knight g to e2. Both Phoenix and Kasparov's favorite, but Jumabayev plays knight to h5 immediately, initiating a trade of these bishops. White can't really do anything about it. He can't play bishop f4, so we take on e7. Queen takes, knight g to e2, and this plan for white usually entails some preparation of going f3 and e4, kind of the central plan. The other plan with a knight on f3, usually white would be going for a minority attack here on the queen side. But in this game, after castles by black, Fabi goes rook a to e1. He's going for the central plan here, plays knight c1, and this is just so the rook can protect the pawn here, and we're able to push f3, so e4 is on the cards. And black goes for counterplay, b6, preparing c5. Queen f2 by Fabi, c5, and this had indeed been played once before. In that game, white went for the move pawn to g4. But Fabi plays a novelty here. He plays queen to h4. And here we see Jumabayev playing his queen back. So he wants to keep an eye on the knight, but he also doesn't want the queen to be unprotected. And probably he thought his rooks belonged somewhere else. If black were ever to play c4, he would have to play and follow up with b5, b4, etc. So probably he needs one rook on b8. I'm not sure what the other one should do, but he didn't want to define it. Played queen d8, and Fabi goes on with his queenside action. Sorry, excuse me, kingside action with g4. The knight has only one square. Knight g7. Knight 1 to e2. We're on move 18 here. Rook b8, and this indicates that black wants to go for this plan that I mentioned, to play b5, b4, go for counterplay on the queen side. Fabi tries to put a spanner in the works and stop that a little bit. And we see that, we see that Fabi has a decent time advantage at this stage, 48 minutes against 23. And Jumabayev decides to play here c4, and he goes for the plan on the queen side, and these moves are coming in more quickly. a6 and b5 will be the next move. He plays these moves basically a la tempo, plays them almost immediately. And now facing b4 here, Fabiano decides not to just sit back and let black get this kind of play, and he plays the interesting move pawn to b4 here. We often see a similar idea in the Benoni defense. There, black is often trying to get, the pawns rolling, and there b4 can be a very strong move to kind of stop black in his tracks. Now, if we don't take en passant, sure, this would be a weak pawn, and we could attack it. But on the other hand, the knight is sitting quite pretty here. It's sort of keeping at least one piece at bay because it has to protect the pawn, and we can quite easily protect this pawn and then go for actions on the king side. Maybe try to go for e4 eventually, or some kind of pawn push. And meanwhile, black doesn't really have counterplay. Takes too much time to get something going on the queen side. So after b4, Jumabayev decides to take on b3 en passant. Bishop takes, and b4. Now, Fabi put the knight on e2. The computer prefers to put it on a4, and it looks more logical to me, because this looks like a really juicy square for a knight, and we do keep the pressure on d5. g5 is on the cards in some lines. This looks like a weak spot, and in conjunction with a knight on c5, white should have some advantage. But he plays the knight to e2. Looks like he's more interested in after bishop c8. He put it on g3, and he clearly wants to play g5 and just win this pawn. And it looks like a strong plan. But now we see the idea of bishop c8. It's bishop a6, and Jumabayev is really keen to get some counterplay going here, and he hits the white rook now with bishop a6. And what to do? Surprisingly, Caruana decides to give up the rook. He could have played rook f2, but I guess he didn't fancy the position of the bishop to c4. Black is simply trying to get this pawn rolling and trying to get rid of the blockader on b3 and just get the pawn rolling. But Fabi, he plays g5, gives up the exchange on f1, and takes back on f1. Note that he can't really take on f6, because then we play bishop c4, and notice the pawn is pinned to the queen, so we can't take on g7. So this will basically leave black with the upper hand, but maybe this was the way to go, because we can maybe play queen h6 here. And the point is, we can't take on f6 because of bishop takes c4, and then knight e4 hitting the queen, and next move is knight g5, and that's basically GG with the queen attacking h7. So black would have to play, instead of taking, would have to play knight e8, and things are complicated here. White can take on c4 and play knight f5, and well, let's just have a look at, this is basically the main line of the computer. Knight e7 is threatened when this would be under attack, so I think we take it here, and then king h1, rook g1 is coming, and black would have to give up the queen. He'd have to play here and give up the queen like this. And what's going on here? Black has a rook and a knight for the queen, but these pawns look mighty strong. And well, if Fabi saw this, and well, he's a great calculator generally, my guess is he did not fancy these pawns coming down the board. Anyway, so he went for rook takes f1 here. Now this guy is under attack. Knight f to e8. Fabi gets the pawn on d5. So some compensation obviously for the exchange. Very strong bishop, well-placed knight, some weaknesses here around the king. These squares, central pawn mass. It's probably still complicated, and in a practical game, I'm not sure people will be feeling too great here against Fabi. But Jumabayev goes on, he plays rook b5, putting pressure here on the knight on d5. Queen e4 by Fabi. But this gives up the pawn here. However, we get f4 at tempo, and then f5. And here actually Jumabayev goes wrong. He should have played a knight to d6, and then just take the pawn. Let's say queen g2 to keep a pin here. We can just take with the f pawn. Sure, we can take this, but black is just in time with king h8 and rook g8, and he should be able to enjoy his material advantage. However, after knight f6, Fabi took, and now he has a fantastic tactical shot. He takes on g6. Queen is under attack, so we have to take on g6 with queen. And here's the shot. Can you see it? Bishop takes on f7. And black is in a world of hurt. If he moves the king, simply lose the queen. So we have to take with the rook, which is what Jumabayev did. No, sorry, if you take with the rook, then I'm going to check on the back rank. And you can't do anything, this is just mate, you'd have to interpose the knight. But then Fabi would be up all the material, and this would be game over. So Jumabayev had to give up the queen, he had to play queen takes f7, takes and takes. And this should be good for white, he's up a pawn and these two connected passers should, you know, count for something. But it's tricky because black has a lot of pieces. I mean, the rooks are active, and Fabi decides to tuck the king on after e4, knight h4 check on h3. And this probably would have been okay if he had found the move queen to d2 here. We are on move 40. Yeah, his 41st move. And yeah, from the looks of it, they just reached the time control. I'm not sure if you made this move after thinking, but queen c4 was not a good move. This is the move that Fabi played. And he should have played queen d2, hitting the rook. Not giving black time, and why can't we give black time? Queen c4 gives black time. There's no rook under attack, so he has time to play h5. And what's the point of h5? If we play knight f4 check immediately, the king runs, attacks this. We have to protect the rook, and then, okay, white has to move. But after pawn to h5, if white does something like this, knight f4, and we are simply checkmated. Rook g4 is coming. An important checkmate pattern. So let's go back. Turns out white can't do much, and Fabi, he's going to lose the knight on g3. So to avoid the mate, he played king g2, but now h4, and the knight is lost. So now the king goes back because now there's no longer mate. After knight f4, there's no longer rook g4. So the king is fine on h3, but black gets the piece. And now we have this most unusual material distribution. We have 2 rooks and a knight against a queen and 3 pawns. Technically equal material, but I think the key factor here is that the rooks are active and they're able to, you know, create threats pretty quickly. And also the white king is slightly vulnerable, and seems like white would have to avoid tactics, you know, almost on every turn. So rook f3 is played, queen b7 check, and king h6. And notice this, another very important pattern. And this pattern I have covered in a pattern recognition video. I do recommend you check it out. It's called the knight defending the king. This type of situation and setup is very good to know, because the knight, like this next to the king, it covers so many of the checking squares that the queen can use. First of all, it's blocking the 6th rank. No check on the 6th rank. There's going to be no diagonal checks, and there's not going to be any check here. So how does the white queen even check the king? It would have to come from this diagonal, but that takes a long time. So this is a very important defensive pattern, and Jumabayev surely aware of that. So his king is actually quite safe. After queen b8, the idea is simply to protect the pawn. Now if we take the pawn, we lose both rooks for the queen, and we're not going to win with just the knight. So black creates threats, trying to attack the white pawns, and Fabi gives it up. Not much to do. If he pushes e5, then we lose control of g3, so the e pawn is actually going to drop. d6, rook to d4, and black will pretty easily gather this pawn if he needs to, and he gets it here immediately. And well, I can tell you this is lost according to the table base, and in practice it looks like it's very difficult to play this for white. Rook a5, especially since there's no worry with the black king. We can just improve the pieces here. Eventually rook d3, he found a tactic here. We can't take the rook on account of knight f4 check, and now with the pieces coming in, it's getting increasingly difficult. Knight f4, now the knight comes in, king f2, rook g takes g3, and this is basically GG. He gets the pawn, the pieces are too active, we don't even have a check. Okay, we can give this check, but we can block with a knight or the rook, basically. basically whatever. And after queen e4, rook to g2, and Fabi resigned. If it goes to f1, there's going to be rook d1. If it goes to e1, we can play rook e2, and finally, if we take, then nothing happens. So game over, and fantastic result for Rinat Jumabayev. I'm sure he was not expecting this when the tournament started, but now, I mean, if he can beat Fabi, he can beat everybody. So he has to look forward and see how far he can go. But this loss of Fabiano also means that for the first time since 2013, Magnus Carlsen is the only player in the world with a rating above 2800. You see that we have a few players very close: Rinat Caruana, Nepomniachtchi, Aronian, and then a big pack of very strong players: Grishuk, Giri, Mamdyarov, and so, etc. But yeah, first time in a long time, since 2013, that we have only one player with 2800 plus. And probably that will remain throughout the tournament. I don't see anybody making any big gains here. But the tournament goes on, and we'll keep watching. Plenty of chess still remaining, and I love this tournament. See you next time, guys. Bye bye.